Carla Walker. In 1974, 17-year-old Carla Walker was a junior at Western Hills High School in Fort Worth, Texas. Standing just 4 feet 11, she had long honey blonde hair that cascaded past her shoulders. She was in a relationship with Rodney McCoy, a wiry, good-natured young man who played quarterback for the school's football team. The couple often talked about their future, hoping to attend Texas Tech University together. Carla confided in her closest friends that she was certain she and Rodney would one day marry and build a life together. On the evening of February 16, 1974, Rodney arrived at the Walker home in Benbrook, a neighborhood in far west Fort Worth, to take Carla to the school's Valentine's Day dance. After the dance ended around 11:30 p.m., Rodney invited another couple to join him and Carla for a drive along Camp Bowie Boulevard and the Benbrook traffic circle. They made stops at a few popular teen hangouts, including Mr. Quick Hamburgers and Taco Bell. After dropping off their friends, Rodney and Carla drove to Brunswick Ridgely Bowl, a nearby bowling alley, where Carla stepped inside to use the restroom. Shortly after she got back into the car, the passenger door suddenly swung open. Rodney caught a brief glimpse of a tall man with short brown hair before the stranger began striking him over the head with the butt of a pistol. At some point during the assault, the gun's magazine clip became dislodged and fell onto the pavement. The attacker then grabbed Carla. As Rodney, barely conscious, struggled to process what was happening, he heard the man say, "You're coming with me, aren't you, sweetie?" Carla, in a desperate plea, told Rodney, "Go get my dad. Rodney, go get my dad." By the time Rodney regained full awareness, he was in the driver's seat, and it was around 1 a.m. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. Rodney sped toward the Walker home, located less than a mile away. In his panic, he drove over the curb and onto the front lawn before slamming on the brakes. Inside, Carla's parents, Leighton and Doris, were still awake, playing dominoes in the dining room with relatives. Her 12-year-old brother, Jim, and 18-year-old sister, Cindy, were in the living room watching television when they heard frantic banging at the front door. They were shocked to see Rodney standing there, blood streaming down his face. In a desperate panic, he shouted, "Mr. Walker, they've got her. They're gonna hurt her bad." Leighton, a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel, immediately grabbed his pistol and rushed out toward the bowling alley. Meanwhile, Doris picked up the family's rotary phone, dialing the operator and asking to be connected to the police. As officers searched the parking lot, they discovered Carla's purse along with the magazine clip that had fallen from the attacker's gun. Meanwhile, other officers patrolled the surrounding streets in squad cars, scanning for any trace of Carla. After sunrise, more resources were deployed in the search, including officers using binoculars and helicopters circling the city. When classes resumed on Monday morning, detectives visited Western Hills High School. They examined contact sheets from the dance, looking for anyone who seemed out of place. Students were stopped in the hallways and questioned about whether they knew anyone who might want to harm Carla. Then, on February 20th, 1974, 4 days after Carla vanished, 2 officers assigned to the case were driving along a remote 2-lane road near Benbrook Lake, about 5 miles southwest of the bowling alley. They pulled over near a culvert and a concrete drainage tunnel designed to allow water to pass beneath the road. Peering inside, they spotted a young woman lying on her back. Carla's face and neck were covered in scratches and deep bruises. It appeared she had been strangled, but with no ligature marks on her neck, investigators concluded that the killer had used his hands. The discovery of her body dominated the front page of the Star-Telegram, sending shockwaves through the community. Her funeral was held at the Western Hills Church of Christ, drawing more than 1,250 mourners, far exceeding the church's capacity. In response to the brutal crime, Fort Worth officials assembled a task force made up of detectives from various local police departments. However, investigators had little evidence to go on. No fingerprints were found on Carla's body or clothing, and the only blood present on her dress came from Rodney's head injuries. Traces of bodily fluid were recovered, but with DNA identification technology still in its infancy, they provided no leads. At the time, there were no surveillance cameras in parking lots or license plate readers on highways to aid in the investigation. In an effort to generate leads, authorities established a 24-hour tip line. At the downtown police headquarters, officers sat behind metal desks, sipping lukewarm coffee as they took calls from citizens offering names of potential suspects. Tips flooded in, with callers suggesting that Carla's killer was everything from a pair of marijuana dealers to a carnival worker from the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo, or even a quiet young man who often bowled alone at the alley where she had been abducted. Detectives also investigated reports of an argument between Carla and Rodney at Mr. Quick Hamburger's the night before the dance. In an attempt to jog Rodney's memory, investigators enlisted the help of a hypnotist. While under hypnosis, the most crucial detail Rodney recalled was that Carla's attacker had been wearing a brown or tan cowboy hat. When the hypnotist snapped his fingers, bringing Rodney back to full awareness, he broke down in tears. Rodney was devastated, haunted by the fact that he hadn't been able to save Carla. Meanwhile, during a task force meeting, detectives discussed another unsolved case, one that had occurred nearly a year earlier on February 7, 1973. That night, a young woman named Becky Martin never made it home after attending a night class at Tarrant County Junior College's campus. Her body was discovered nearly 7 weeks later, so decomposed that the cause of death couldn't be determined. The medical examiner suggested Becky might have been stabbed, strangled, or even shot through the stomach. However, what truly caught investigators' attention was the location where her body was found, a culvert just outside the city limits. 2 young women, both found in culverts, exactly a year apart. The similarity felt like more than just coincidence. Though they kept their suspicions quiet, detectives began considering the possibility of a serial offender. By March, a month after Carla's murder, the task force had only one promising lead. The magazine clip found in the bowling alley parking lot belonged to a newer model .22 Ruger handgun. Seeking further information, they enlisted the help of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, ATF, requesting a list of Fort Worth residents who had purchased that specific model. The ATF compiled a list of a couple dozen names, and detectives set out to interview each one. Among those on the list was 31-year-old truck driver Glenn McCurley. He had grown up in West Texas as the eldest of 3 boys, but during his teenage years, his parents sent him to Westview Boys' Home in southwestern Oklahoma. Sponsored by the Churches of Christ, Westview advertised itself as a refuge for boys facing family difficulties, neglect, or minor legal troubles, those in need of guidance rather than detention. However, McCurley's time there didn't seem to have a lasting impact. By February 1961, he had left Westview and was living in Abilene, Texas, where he was caught stealing a car. After abandoning that stolen car, McCurley took another, triggering a pursuit by the State Highway Patrol. Officers eventually shot out one of his tires, forcing him to drive onto a vacant lot before attempting to flee on foot. However, he was quickly apprehended. In court, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He was released early in the spring of 1962 at the age of 19. McCurley later relocated to Midland, where he met a blonde high school student named Judy Watson. On February 16, 1963, they were married in a Baptist church and moved into a modest rental home. McCurley eventually secured a job as a truck driver for the U.S. Postal Service, running a route between Dallas and Fort Worth. Meanwhile, Judy gave birth to their 2 sons, Craig and Roddy. In 1972, McCurley relocated his young family to a neighborhood in West Fort Worth. He and Judy enrolled their sons in the local public elementary school and became members of Ridgely West Baptist Church. McCurley found work as a truck driver, transporting prefabricated concrete slabs to construction sites, while Judy took a job at the church's daycare center. However, one acquaintance noted a troubling habit. McCurley would often make inappropriate remarks when noticing an attractive woman, saying things like, "Take a look at that." In early March 1974, 2 detectives arrived at McCurley's home to question him about his .22 Ruger pistol. When asked about the weapon, He claimed it had been stolen from his pickup truck 6 weeks earlier while he was out fishing. He then agreed to take a polygraph test at the police station, which he passed. As a result, the task force quickly dismissed him as a suspect. By late spring of 1974, investigators still had little to show for their work. The task force didn't officially disband, but many of the detectives were ordered by their supervisors to return to their other cases. Strangers would occasionally call the Walkers' house, many of them anonymously, claiming they had information about who ended Carla's life. Leighton talked to all of them. He took notes and kept them in a metal box the size of a cigar box. He wrote down names and addresses of potential suspects, and he drew circles on maps where he had been told the culprit lived. He was not going to rest until he knew the man responsible was behind bars. When Carla's younger brother, Jim, turned 16 and got his driver's license, he began spending his free time helping his dad hunt for the perpetrator. Sometimes on the anniversary, he would prowl the parking lot of the Brunswick Ridgely Bull looking for anyone suspicious. Jim took boxing lessons at the Panther Boys Club, joined the high school's wrestling and football teams, and went on long runs through his neighborhood. "I wanted to be ready in case I ever came across the culprit," Jim said. "My plan was to overpower him and take him someplace far away. Maybe somewhere out in West Texas where no one can hear him scream." On February 19th of 1977, almost precisely 3 years after Carla's body was found, someone came across the body of 25-year-old June Ward, a vocational nurse lying next to a curb in South Fort Worth. June was naked except for a bra strap wrapped around her neck. She'd been strangled and beaten over the head with what the one reporter described as a sharp, heavy object. Detectives who had worked on the Carla Walker task force couldn't help but notice the similarities between the two crimes. Then, on July 9th of 1980, the body of a 19-year-old woman named Denise Hogue, described in the newspaper as an unemployed drifter, was found a few feet from a creek bridge in South Fort Worth. She too had been strangled. 2.5 years later, in February of 1983, the body of Christy Tower, a waitress at the Family Billy Bob's Texas nightclub in the Stockyards, was discovered in a field north of the city. Her hands were bound with electrical wire and another wire was twisted around her neck. Like the other crimes, Christy's case remained a mystery. Though a few days after her body was found, detectives received a curious bit of news. They learned that Christy's purse had been found in a dumpster behind Cheers, a bar on Champ Bowie Boulevard. Cheers was only a half a mile from the Brunswick Ridgely bowling parking lot, the place where Carla had been kidnapped in February of 1974. Residents were getting more worried about the prospect of a serial offender. Such concerns grew when Catherine Davis, a 23-year-old aspiring model, went missing on September 9th of 1984. Her body was found in a field in far South Fort Worth. About a month later, on October 19th, Marilyn Hartman, a 25-year-old middle school teacher, was found gagged and strangled in her Fort Worth bedroom. Just 3 days after that, Cindy Heller, a 23-year-old Texas Christian University graduate and former beauty contestant, disappeared after last being seen near Helen Mall. She was later found strangled in a creek bed on Texas Christian University campus. The tragedies kept piling up. On November 26th of 1984, Catherine Jackson, another local middle school teacher, was found naked in her bathtub with the water still running. She had been strangled with a cord. 2 weeks after that, Angela Ewart, a 21-year-old part-time model and programmer for an FM rock station, left her fiancé's house in southwest Fort Worth. The following day, her car was found abandoned by a highway in a southern part of the city, and her decomposed remains were eventually discovered in a field north of Fort Worth. On the evening of December 22nd, just days before Christmas, 21-year-old Regina Grover was seen with her boyfriend walking out of the Keg, a restaurant on Camp Bowie. She was found the next day, strangled and drowned in a creek under a bridge in North Fort Worth. Her boyfriend, who was found in his bed at his apartment, had been fatally bludgeoned. Fort Worth women, especially those living in the southwestern part of the city, were panicking. Local media reported on skyrocketing gun and mace sales. When the police department offered a free seminar on self-defense, more than 3,000 attended, most of them women. The police department formed another task force. "We're going to break this thing," Police Chief H.F. Hopkins promised. Detectives questioned every suspect from ex-cons with long rap sheets to a freelance photographer. The investigation, though, was fruitless. The only welcome news was a lull in crimes. The culprit, if it was one culprit, seemed to have retreated. That was until February 24th of 1986. A passerby came across a woman's unclothed body, partially wrapped in a blanket, lying on a hillside near a park in central Fort Worth. She had been strangled, but the police could not identify her through the usual means, fingerprints or dental records, nor did they receive any reports about a missing woman that might have provided a clue. Another year passed, and then another. And this time it really did appear as if the unknown man committing all these crimes had retreated for good. Carla Walker's little brother, Jim, had not given up. After graduating from Western Hills High, Jim had attended Sam Houston State University, where he read books on serial offenders and took courses in abnormal psychology so that he could better understand what he described as the criminal mind. After he graduated from college, he moved back to Fort Worth and applied to become an officer with the city's police department. His plan was to get promoted to detective and get his hands on Carla's files and find the man responsible. During a training session at the academy's firing range, however, Jim noticed something was wrong with his eyesight. A doctor later diagnosed him with a congenital eye condition. Forced to drop out of the academy, he went to work in security at a local office of defense contractor General Dynamics. But he continued hunting for the man responsible. After his father passed away in 1987 of a heart attack, Jim dug through the notes in Layton's metal box looking for new leads to pursue. After his mother passed away in February 2015, Jim purchased his parents' home and moved into it with his wife. "I wanted to be there in case somebody ever got a conscience at 3 in the morning and showed up to confess," he said. In February, detectives Leah Wagner and Officer Jeff Bennett decided to take another look at Carla's case after Jim made a request. Among those they re-interviewed was Carla's then-boyfriend, Rodney McCoy, who had moved to Alaska as soon as he graduated from high school to work on an oil rig, telling his family that he needed to get as far away from Fort Worth as possible. He eventually returned to Texas and was living near Austin when Wagner and Bennett reached him. To try to locate new witnesses, investigators posted a message on the police department's Facebook page. They got a couple dozen responses, including one from a woman who claimed that her ex-husband had grown up in the same neighborhood as Carla and had kept a stash of newspaper articles about her case, which he occasionally reread. A likely sign said the ex-wife that he was responsible. No doubt to the ex-wife's disappointment, the ex-husband was able to prove he'd been out of town the weekend Carla's life was taken. What the detectives needed was physical evidence, and the best physical evidence they could hope to find, of course, was the culprit's DNA. Since Carla lost her life, the technology of DNA identification had not only been developed, but had progressed beyond anyone's expectations. There were now even laboratories that specialized in genealogical mapping, in which technicians use freely accessible databases to link DNA from an unknown person to the DNA of that person's relatives. Fortunately for Wagner and Bennett, dress and other clothing she'd worn the night her life was ended had been carefully packed away in paper bags in the police department's evidence lab, which meant there was a chance that technicians still could turn up a usable sample of DNA. After all these years, however, there was no way of knowing whether the DNA had degraded, which would prevent the technicians from compiling a full genetic profile of the man responsible. Once more, conducting DNA tests on Carla's clothes could cost the Fort Worth Police Department as much as $20,000, money that was more likely to go towards active cases. Wagner and Bennett were determined to find at least one good lead, but they knew the odds were against them. Then, their investigation took an unpredictable turn. Vincent Strange was a 40-year-old Fort Worth aerospace technician and true crime buff. In February 2017, he created a podcast about unsolved cases in Texas. His first story was going to be about Carla Walker, whose case he had read about while poking around the internet. He interviewed Carla's siblings, Jim and Cindy, as well as a few of her friends. One person who did listen to it was Diane Kuykendall. Diane had gone to school with Carla. Carla always smiled at her in the hallway, even though they didn't really know each other. Diane said it made her feel good and that she wishes that there was some way that she could pay Carla back. Diane decided to fly pamphlets to the likes of Dateline's Keith Morrison. Fox sent the pamphlets to the likes of Dateline's Keith Morrison, Fox News' Nancy Grace, and Paul Holes, a retired investigator who works for the Oxygen Network. Paul Holes was intrigued and convinced Oxygen to pay $18,000 to cover the cost of DNA testing on Carla's clothes. At a lab in California, technicians found some intact, untainted bodily fluid were found. From that fluid, they were able to develop a full DNA profile, which they uploaded to CODIS, a nationwide law enforcement database that contains the DNA of millions of criminal offenders. CODIS, however, couldn't find a match. Paul Holes and his producers contacted a Texas lab that also does genealogical mapping. But technicians there had no luck either. David Millman, CEO of Othram, then got into contact with Paul Holes. He said he was optimistic that his particular DNA identification method, a sophisticated technology that used genome sequencing, could find a match. The morning of July 4th of 2020, David Middleman called Officer Bennett. "We've connected the DNA to a particular family tree," he said. "The last name is McCurley." After some further testing and police work, Middleman and Bennett landed on Glenn Samuel McCurley Jr., who had been living in Fort Worth at the time of Carla's demise. Bennett saw Glenn McCurley Jr. was the truck driver who had told the police back in 1974 that his Ruger 22 had been stolen. Wagner and Bennett did a background check on McCurley, but there was little to learn. As far as they could tell, other than his 1961 criminal conviction for stealing a car when he was 18, he had no encounters with the police. McCurley was no longer driving trucks full-time by then. He took on handyman jobs and did part-time maintenance work at a fitness club. Wagner and Bennett decided to pay him a visit. They arrived unannounced at the McCurley's home. McCurley and his wife, Judy, politely invited the detectives into the living room and chatted amiably. McCurley talked about his old truck driving the eggs. Judy said she had spent 32 years at Ridgely West Baptist Daycare Program, finally retiring in February 2004 because of health issues. She also mentioned that her husband suffered from diabetes and that he'd recently had surgery to remove a tumor the size of a quarter on his liver. "We're not ready for this," Judy said, "especially with his cancer." Finally, McCurley asked the detectives, his voice raspy, "What do you want to talk about?" "We're going to take you way back," Wagner said. "Back in 1974, y'all were living here at the time, so you may have heard about it. There was a young lady kidnapped from a bowling alley." "I know exactly which one you're talking about," Judy immediately said. "Carla Walker." Judy later told detectives she could remember where the Walker family lived on Williams Road. "They kept her room the same way it was," she said. "They kept her car still parked in the driveway for years and years. You'd drive by and see that car parked in the driveway, and it was just absolutely heartbreaking." Detective Wagner said that she and Bennett had reopened the investigation and were contacting those who had been interviewed by police in 1974. "It's a huge case," she said. "And we saw at one point they had talked to you, Mr. McCurley." Wagner asked McCurley if she could take a DNA sample. "It would be the easiest way to eliminate him as a suspect," she explained. McCurley hesitated. Then he took a pen, signed a consent form, and opened his mouth so Wagner could dab the inside of his cheek with a Q-tip. Looking on, Judy told the detectives, "I hope you find out who is responsible. That girl needs to be remembered as someone who mattered." 11 days later, after lab techs verified that the DNA from McCurley's cheek perfectly matched the DNA found on his bra strap, the members of the U.S. Marshals North Texas Fugitive Task Force arrived at his house to arrest him. He was driven downtown to the police department, where he waived his right to have a lawyer present during his interrogation. For several minutes, he sat alone in an interview room. At first, he denied any involvement. He claimed he had never seen Carla Walker before. Finally, he said with tears swelling in his eyes, "Okay, I did do it, I guess." He told the detectives that on the afternoon of February 16th of 1974, he had drunk whiskey and beer for several hours. He said he began driving around and parked in some parking lots. At one point, he drove to the bowling ball place. It seemed as if McCurley was about to confess. Instead, he told the detectives he'd heard a girl screaming in a nearby car. "I went over there to see if I could help." This big guy had her up against the door, jerking her around. McCurley said he opened the front passenger door and gotten into a tussle with the boy. He pushed him off Carla, led her back to his car, and then drove her to another parking lot. She started hugging me, thanking me, and one thing led to another. He claimed that everything that happened between him and Carla was consensual, and he did not know what had happened to her after that. After speaking to his court-appointed attorneys, McCurley pleaded not guilty. His attorneys argued in their court filings that Othram Lab's DNA test was flawed and that Wagner and Bennett had coerced McCurley into a false confession. The attorneys also portrayed McCurley as feeble. This man poses no threat to anyone. As far as I can tell, he has led an utterly uneventful life. 9 months later, on June 16 of 2021, the first pre-trial hearing open to the public took place. Dressed in a green jail-ish jumpsuit, McCurley was wheeled into the courtroom. When the trial formally began a few months later, Carla's boyfriend, Rodney, took the stand to recount the harrowing night she disappeared. Retired Detective Jim Minter testified about the original investigation, while Wagner and Bennett detailed their own police work. Prosecutors Dia Vignen and Emily Dixon unfolded the powder blue dress Carla had worn the night she was taken, presenting it to the jury. They also played 3 hours of the videotaped interview in which Wagner and Bennett questioned McCurley following his arrest. Then came the prosecution's most damning revelation, a piece of evidence that had not been publicly known. The .22 Ruger McCurley had long claimed was stolen had been found during a search of his home, concealed in a hidden compartment above a door. With such overwhelming proof, the case was effectively closed. On the third day of the trial, McCurley changed his plea to guilty, and the judge swiftly sentenced him to life in prison. Even after the verdict, lingering questions remained. What could have driven Glenn McCurley, a man without a known history of violent crime, to commit such a brutal act? Was it a spur-of-the-moment decision fueled by alcohol? Or had he been a hidden predator responsible for the deaths of other young women in Fort Worth? And if he had been a serial offender, what caused him to stop in the mid-1980s? Did he undergo a true change of heart, or was he simply better at avoiding detection? Was redemption even a possibility? Authorities suspect that McCurley may be linked to additional crimes, and investigations into his potential involvement remain ongoing. Moving on to the next case. Shawn Ritchie was a 20-year-old from Fraserburgh, Scotland. On Halloween night in 2014, he attended a party in Greenburn, Scotland. He and 7 friends had traveled in a van to a secluded farmhouse in the countryside near Stricken. At some point during the night, an unknown incident occurred, prompting Shawn and his friends to flee the house in a panic. In the chaos, they split into 2 groups, each believing that Shawn was with the other. While his friends all made it home that night, Shawn never did. When he failed to return the following day, his family reported him missing. What followed was one of the largest search operations in Scotland's history. Authorities dedicated thousands of man-hours to scouring the area, bringing in soil experts, psychological profilers, search dogs, divers, and helicopters. The rough terrain, consisting of bogs, dense gorse bushes, ponds, and thick woodland, made the search incredibly challenging. The police had ground-penetrating radar, and they had found stuff in the bogs. Tiny little artifacts and loads of animal bones, but no trace of Shawn. A few days later, some of Shawn's clothing and belongings were discovered close to the farmhouse and a boggy area, but that was the last evidence ever found. Nothing would ever turn up after that. Police would soon learn that on that day, 2 emergency calls were made to emergency services from the Greenburn area. One call was made requesting for help, and the second call was made canceling the requested help. No one knows who made the calls or why. Shawn's father, Charlie, believes that he was likely taken by someone and murdered. Charlie doesn't believe Shawn is alive. Even if he was not taken by someone, the temperature that night had dipped below 0 degrees Celsius, and with the minimal clothing he had on, he would not have survived the conditions. None of Shawn's friends have ever spoken publicly about what happened that day and remained quiet. Shawn's father revealed in a newspaper interview that he was aware the party had been attended by individuals of questionable character. However, the of these people and their connection to Shawn remain unclear. While police have not ruled out the possibility of foul play, they have found no concrete evidence indicating that Shawn was attacked or murdered. To this day, his disappearance remains an unsolved mystery. Relisha. Relisha was an 8-year-old girl from Washington, D.C. For over a year, her family had been living in a homeless shelter located in the former D.C. General Hospital. It was the largest shelter in the district, accommodating hundreds of families and up to 600 children. In March 2014, a counselor at Relisha's elementary school noticed that she had been absent from classes for an entire month. Some of her absences had been excused by a Dr. Khalil Tatum. Concerned, the school counselor contacted a social worker to look into Relisha's prolonged absence. This inquiry led to the discovery that Dr. Tatum was actually Khalil Tatum, a janitor at the shelter Relisha stayed at. In late February, Relisha's mother, Shamika Young, asked Tatum to care for her. She later said she wanted Relisha to be able to escape the conditions at the shelter, which was filthy, chaotic, crime-ridden, infested with vermin, and had no playground. Relisha was last seen at a hotel which captured her and Tatum checking in to a Holiday Inn in Washington, D.C. Authorities started a search for Tatum and Relisha after a social worker filed a missing persons report. It was discovered that Tatum had murdered his wife, Andrea Tatum, inside motel. A witness claimed that he helped Tatum make an internet search relating to the murder. Investigators believe Tatum shot his wife to death that night or early the next morning. They had been in the process of a divorce. Her body was found in a motel room in Oxon Hill, Maryland. Tatum and Relisha were both missing, prompting authorities to launch an urgent search, fearing for the child's safety. Tatum was already wanted for car theft, and after his wife's body was discovered, he was also charged with murder. His criminal history included multiple arrests for breaking and entering, but his only prior felony conviction had been for decades earlier. Investigators found that on March 1st, Tatum had purchased a box of 42-gallon trash bags along with lye, a substance known to accelerate decomposition. Authorities later stated that he had murdered Relisha. On March 31st, Tatum's body was discovered in Kenilworth Park and Aquatic Gardens. He had died by suicide using the same gun that was used to kill his wife. Despite extensive searches, there has been no trace of Relisha to this day. Moving on to the next case. Elena Laswell. After 2 decades of searching for answers, a crucial breakthrough has finally surfaced in the case of Elena Teresa Adele Laswell. The 15-year-old, whose life was tragically stolen, has remained at the heart of a relentless investigation for the past 20 years. Her brutal death on July 10, 2004, left an unfillable void in the lives of her family and community. Now, on the 20th anniversary of her passing, a long-awaited arrest has reignited hope in a case that had seemingly gone cold. Born on January 17, 1989, in Phoenix, Arizona, Elena was cherished by her family, her parents, Steve and Molly, her 4 brothers, and her sister, who held her in the highest regard. Growing up, she was deeply involved in team sports, had a passion for creating art, and shared a special connection with animals. She attended several local schools, including St. Gregory's Catholic School, Serene Elementary School, and Phoenix Preparatory Academy, from which she graduated in May 2004. Elena eagerly looked forward to starting North High School that coming February, filled with dreams and aspirations for her future. Dreams that would be cruelly shattered by an unimaginable act of violence. On the evening of July 10, 2004, at approximately 8 p.m., police responded to a distressing 911 call from a residence on North 21st Drive in Phoenix, Arizona. Upon arrival, officers were directed to a room where they discovered 15-year-old Elena Laswell, gravely injured and clinging to life. Despite immediate emergency intervention, Elena was tragically pronounced deceased at the scene. The case was swiftly turned over to homicide detectives, who pursued every possible lead. However, despite their tireless efforts and extensive investigations, no suspects were identified, and the case eventually went cold. For years, Elena's family and the Phoenix Police Department endured the unbearable frustration of an unsolved crime, with little hope of resolution. Then, years later, a crucial breakthrough emerged. In 2012, advancements in DNA technology allowed detectives to re-examine evidence from the crime scene. Utilizing cutting-edge forensic techniques, investigators were able to extract a DNA profile that led them to a match, Sergio Francisco Reyes. By March 2013, forensic evidence had definitively identified Reyes as a primary suspect, reigniting the case and offering renewed hope for justice. Sergio Reyes was 17 years old at the time of the crime in February 2004, and his connection to the tragedy was not immediately known to investigators. Reyes was indicted by Maricopa County Grand Jury in February 2014. But because he was residing in Mexico at the time, extradition procedures were required to bring him back to the United States. This process involved cooperation with U.S. Marshals and Mexican authorities. On July 10, 2024, the 20th anniversary of Elena's passing, Reyes was arrested and extradited to Phoenix. He faces multiple charges, including first-degree assault, kidnapping, and burglary. His bond was set at $1,500,000. The Phoenix Police Department has not disclosed whether Reyes had any prior connection to Elena. Elena's family, including her parents and siblings, have expressed a mixture of relief and continued sorrow. Her aunt Katie Treville said, "Knowing that someone is being held responsible feels awesome. It has been a long haul, and thank God for Phoenix PD. They have been absolutely amazing. I just really felt that they were on the right trail and that they would get it. I just did not know when." Elena's mother had passed away in the years since her daughter's slaying. But Katie said the mother's wish was not revenge. She wonders what Elena's life could have been. Wondering, you know what? Would she be married? What would she be doing now? Elena's mother described Reyes as a monster, emphasizing how difficult it is to recognize true evil in the real world, far different from the depictions of monsters in childhood stories. Her father, Steve Laswell, admitted that after 2 decades, he had lost hope of any further progress in the case. "To be truthful, I really wasn't expecting anything more to come of it," he said. "Having him arrested means preventing him from doing anything like this again. That was the primary hope." Despite the years that have passed, the loss of Elena remains ever present in their lives. "We all continue to miss Elena, and we think about what she might have been today," Steve added. He expressed deep gratitude to the Phoenix Police Department and all those who remained dedicated to seeking justice for his daughter. Now, as the legal process moves forward, the family's grief is tempered by a sense of closure, knowing that the person responsible for their daughter's tragic fate will finally be held accountable. Moving on to the next case. Jennifer Renee Odom. 12-year-old Jennifer Renee Odom was a 7th grader at Thomas E. Whiteman Middle School in Wesley Chapel, Florida, in 1993. She played the clarinet in the school band and was also a talented barefoot water skier, often reaching the top of the human pyramid in tournaments. Jennifer was born on August 25, 1980, as the eldest daughter of Renee Converse and her stepfather Clark Converse. She had a younger sister, 9-year-old Jessica and Odom, and was the granddaughter of Jim and Margie Denny. The family lived in St. Joseph, a small community near Dade City, Florida. Jennifer and Jessica shared a deep bond, playing with their rabbit named Beanie, riding four-wheelers, building forts, and swimming in the creek behind their house on the family's 15-acre property. Jennifer was known for her love of the outdoors, spending plenty of time outside, which gave her a tan and kept her fit. She had a special bond with her Springer Spaniel, Gypsy. On the crisp morning of Friday, February 19, 1993, Jennifer wore her white jeans, a white turtleneck, and a red cashmere sweater, a gift from her grandmother. Her shoulder-length chestnut hair framed her face as she prepared for school. After lacing up her black boots, Jennifer and her mother drove the 200 yards up their winding lime rock driveway to wait for the school bus by their mailbox. Jennifer climbed onto the bus and took her usual spot on the back seat, so she and her mother could see each other until Renee, following behind, turned left to head to work. After school at around 3 p.m., Jennifer stepped off her school bus, waved goodbye to her friends, and started walking the short 200 yards to her home. At about 4 p.m., Jennifer's sister arrived at their home from school to find it locked and unable to enter. She then called their mother to tell her that her big sister was not home yet. Renee Converse then realized Jennifer must not have made it home. Jennifer's mother called her best friend, Michelle, who confirmed that she had seen Jennifer exit the bus and start walking home. Realizing something was terribly wrong, Jennifer's mother immediately contacted the police. Within hours, deputies initiated a large-scale search. A group of approximately 400 volunteers joined the effort, covering around 60 square miles of countryside. Family, friends, neighbors, and other volunteers scoured the area. Law enforcement brought in police dogs to comb through the rolling groves, pastures, and wooded areas surrounding the small Pasco County town of Dade City. All local law enforcement agencies were on the lookout for a blue truck that had been seen near the scene. Some of Jennifer's classmates recalled seeing an older light blue pickup truck slowly trailing Jennifer as she walked down the road. The children noted that the truck had a silver-painted rear bumper, not chrome, along with a trailer hitch that had wires hanging from it and pipes or a ladder in the back. The driver was described as a white male in his 40s with shoulder-length brown hair. The blue truck was the focus of the search parties as investigators believed that the driver may have been involved in the disappearance of Jennifer. As a last resort to find the truck, the FBI as well as Hernando and Pasco County Sheriff's personnel worked from a dock and boathouse as drivers searched Lake Jovita for the vehicle. 6 days after Jennifer vanished, on Thursday, February 25th, a man and a woman searching an abandoned orange grove about 10 miles north of Jennifer's school bus stop found her badly decomposed nude body. Her body was found near a horse trail off Powell Road south of Brooksville, amid a cluster of pine trees in the orange grove. She was found viciously assaulted and suffered blunt force trauma to her head. Detectives believe that Jennifer likely lost her life in the woods shortly after her disappearance. Hernando County Sheriff, El Ninhuiz, remarked, "We are not exactly sure how long her abductor kept her captive or when exactly the slaying took place, but we are relatively confident it took place in that field." He continued, "Every one of us, including those in law enforcement, can look at Jennifer as our niece, our sister, our granddaughter, and realize that it is a tragedy beyond tragedy." Despite extensive searches, Jennifer's clothing was never found, nor was the blue truck or its driver. As Jennifer's family focused on her funeral arrangements, country music star Vince Gill was scheduled to perform at the local Strawberry Festival on Monday, March 1, 1993. Jennifer's stepfather, Clark Converse, shared that the girls had been excited for weeks to see Gill perform and hoped they could get his autograph. Before the concert, Clark and Jessica went to the festival to honor Jennifer's wish for him to autograph a photo from a previous concert where the girls had posed with him. Between shows, Festival Vice President Joe Newsom brought the 3 snapshots to Gill, who was eating dinner. Clark Converse had asked that Gill sign 1 photo for Jessica, 1 for Jennifer, and 1 for both girls. Newsom recalled, "I told Gill this young lady had been slayed and her dad was outside." Gill replied that he remembered hearing about the incident. He, who also had a young daughter, autographed the photos, writing on one to Jennifer, "May God be with you," as both Gill and Newsom wept. Gill then went to the night's second show. Before singing the last song, he told the audience about Jennifer. "I'm going to try to get through this the best I can," Gill said, his voice cracking. He sang his Grammy-winning hit, "I Still Believe in You," and dedicated it to Jennifer, whose life had been tragically taken. Midway through the song, with tears streaming down his face, Gill asked the crowd to help him finish. Nearly 15,000 voices joined in. Radio personality Jeff Moore, who stood backstage, observed the scene with tears in his own eyes. "It was heart-ripping," he said afterward. Unfortunately, despite the emotional tribute, no one in the community provided investigators with useful information, and Jennifer's case remained unsolved. In a chilling twist, just 13 months before Jennifer's abduction, on January 16, 1992, a 17-year-old girl had been kidnapped as she got off a school bus in north-central Pasco County. She was found in a pool of blood behind an abandoned house, brutally attacked, assaulted, and beaten. Sheriff Mean, who has reported that she suffered significant head and skull injuries. Miraculously, she survived, but her life was forever altered, leaving her paralyzed on her left side. Nin, who has emphasized that she was a former honor roll student and track and field participant, leading an ordinary life and not engaged in any high-risk behavior. Law enforcement had collected DNA from the crime scene, and detectives noted similarities between the attacks on Jennifer and the unnamed girl. They suspected the cases may be connected. Both victims were adolescent girls who were abducted after getting off of the school bus in Pasco County, taken to a remote field, assaulted, and abandoned with the belief they will succumb to their injuries. The other victim was found just a few miles from where Jennifer's body was found. After a series of blind alleys, the police called upon psychic Nancy Mayer, 16 months after the incident, to assist in finding the person responsible for what happened. Nancy Meyer is a psychic from Pennsylvania who has been working with police around the country for decades. According to Nancy, she had consulted and offered critical clues more than 80% of the time. Nancy believed that two men were involved in taking Jennifer's life. She described them as white muscular mechanics, and she said one may be a smoker with a heavy cough. The crime scene photographs were classified. Therefore, Nancy Mayer was not allowed to see it. Despite this, she was able to visualize two men in detail. She was taken to the site where Jennifer's body was found. Nancy pointed out that there were belongings in a nearby area that had not yet been discovered. She was able to describe several of Jennifer's items that were still missing, including her cousin's clarinet case with the letters LO on them. She continued to give information about the perpetrators in hope of solving the case. Detective Carlos Douglas of the Hernando County Sheriff's Office said, "Nancy Mayer was extremely accurate on some things that led us to look in other areas that we had not thought of. So we obtained a lot of information from what she had to offer." On December 2, 1994, Jennifer's Unsolved case was aired on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries on national TV. After the show aired, more than 50 phone tips and even more investigative leads from around the country arrived by mail at the Hernando County Sheriff's Office. A spokesman of the Sheriff's Office said the show did for us what we wanted it to do. It got us some more exposure. Despite the new exposure, former Hernando County Sheriff's Major Gary Zorn Smith, who oversaw the investigation in its early years, said the investigators were stumped. He said there was a strong possibility the crime would go unsolved. "And what's even worse is that if we solve it, it may take another crime to do it," he said at the time. Approximately 2 years after Jennifer's body was found, on Thursday, January 5, 1995, a couple hunting for scrap metal in a rural area of Hernando County discovered Jennifer's missing book bag and clarinet case. It was found several miles from the location of her body. Police were able to lift fingerprints from her backpack and clarinet case from what is believed to be the person responsible. Unfortunately, there was never a hit in the database for a suspect matching these fingerprints. Over the years, the case garnered national attention and haunted the Tampa Bay region. $1,000 in reward money offered for tips went unclaimed. Detectives logged tens of 1,000 of hours chasing leads. Jennifer's family waited for news as the years turned to decades. Jennifer's mother, Renee Converse, wondered if it was somebody Jennifer knew. Clark Converse, Jennifer's stepfather, added, "There is a real chance that the person who did it is somebody we have contact with. If they catch someone, we're going to be thrown into the spotlight. Learning how to deal with a trial and confronting this person is going to throw us to square one in learning to deal with this." Renee said she cries a bit more each year. "The reality is that Jennifer is gone and will never be in our lives again. Nothing is going to change that." She also said that the family is thankful for what they do know. "We are blessed that we have this much closure. We are not looking for her. We know where she is. It is going to be a bittersweet finale." She could still picture her 12-year-old daughter, slim and sun-kissed, waving goodbye out the back window of the Pasco County school bus. It was the last time she would see her brown-eyed firstborn girl. Renee recounts the last words being spoken between the two as "I love you." The couple said they have done everything possible to cooperate in finding Jennifer Slayer. They wanted the person found so that no one else got hurt. On Monday, February 19, 2007, The St. Petersburg Times reported that it marked 14 years since the unsolved abduction and subsequent slaying of Jennifer. In that same year, members of Hernando County Crime Stoppers handed out special playing cards to inmates at the Hernando County Detention Center. Each card featured a brief description of an unsolved case from around the state and a hotline number. Jennifer's card was the Queen of Diamonds and featured 2 color photos. A website has been set up by the Hernando Sheriff's Office with pictures and information about Jennifer. A slideshow was also put together with photos of Jennifer set to a mournful soundtrack. Hernando County Detective George Lloyd Grenlater headed the cold case unit. He was armed with the latest DNA technology and a disturbing theory. I believe that there is probably one person, if not more, that would know who is responsible for this, he said. He also believed that person could be a family member or ex-spouse, either protecting the perpetrator or too afraid to come forward. I think the reason people do not want to get involved is they may not want to sit there and have to testify against that individual. Over the years, a couple of anonymous tips came in that led investigators to believe that there are several people out there with more information, and the investigators wanted them to come forward. They tried various methods of generating new leads, from billboards and a $20,000 reward to a documentary on national TV. Investigators amassed some 1,000 pieces of evidence, took thousands of tips, and conducted hundreds of interviews over time to try to determine who took Jennifer's life. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reached out to the sheriff's office and offered to scan every piece of paper in Jennifer's case so it will be readily available. It was more than 75,000 pieces of paper. During all the investigations, there were clues, including the fingerprints on Jennifer's clarinet case and backpack. There were also suspects. Serial offender Frank Thaniel Potts was a possible suspect. He assaulted a 10-year-old girl in Lakeland in 1993. At the time of the slaying, he was working on a construction site in Pasco County and owned a blue pickup truck, which he allegedly later dismantled. Authorities were unable to link him to Jennifer's case. However, another possible suspect was Walter Ducharme, who lived in the area at the time of the slaying. His ex-wife claimed that he was responsible for it. However, her testimony was inconsistent. When the case against him was presented to a grand jury, he was not indicted. He was no longer believed to be involved in the case. In February 2015, Detective George Lundgren was contacted by Pasco County Sheriff Chris Nacco. According to him, new technology had led to a solid lead in the 1992 case in which the teenage girl was found alive. It was the case investigators believed was linked to Jennifer's. The odds of finding another match, Nacco said, was 1 in 7.7, a number with 30 zeros. Lloyd Gren commented, "I think DNA is going to be a big part of Jennifer's case, as it is with any of the old cases, because items were collected. It is just now that the technology has advanced." The biological evidence found in the investigation of the 1992 case was tested before February 2015, and detectives got a full DNA profile. Investigators used a DNA procedure known as familial searching, which allows law enforcement to find a suspect by comparing male DNA left at the scene with that of family members. The shortfall of a standard DNA search is that a suspect's genetic fingerprint must be on file in the offender database for law enforcement to make a match. Araf Ninhu said until February 2015, there were no leads on that particular piece of DNA. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement compared the DNA to local DNA to see if there were any close matches, which would be a family member. The sheriff said they found the DNA matched that of Jeffrey Crumb, who was in jail at the time. Investigators then obtained DNA samples from Crumb's brother, father, and grandfather. A direct comparison between the DNA found on the victim and that of Crumb's father found a match. Investigators concluded that Jeffrey Crumb took the girl from the 1992 case by the arm and led her behind the abandoned house, where he hit her head with a blunt object so hard it crushed part of her skull and caused her to lose part of her brain, leaving her paralyzed on the one side. This then finally led to the arrest of Jeffrey Crumb, 53 years old at the time, in connection to the 1992 case. It was Crumb's arrest in this case, authorities said, that made him a person of interest, reinvigorating an investigation in Jennifer's case. Sheriff El Ninja said when Crumb was implicated in the 1992 case, he quickly, almost instantaneously became our #1 suspect in Jennifer's case because of the similarities. He also noted that over the years there were suspects, But Crumb was not on that list, so he came out of left field in February 2015. In February 2018, on the 25th anniversary of her daughter's demise, Jennifer's mother told The Times that she and other family members tried to have faith that her case would eventually be solved. I think the investigators would have done anything in the world to have solved this case. In February 2019, Crumb was sentenced to life in prison for the crime he committed in 1992, leaving his victim partly paralyzed. The victim's aunt spoke in court during the sentencing hearing, recounting the lifelong damage he had inflicted. Her aunt said her life stopped that day. She also mentioned Jennifer. A year later, a young lady, Jennifer Odom, was slayed. She said, and that brought back so much different things that today, the perpetrator still has not been caught. The arrest and sentence of Crumb gave Detective Lloyd Grant a new resolve, and Jennifer's family new hope that the person responsible will be caught. Detectives then began an intensive investigation and interviewed everyone they could find for the next several years that may have been associated with Crumb around the time Jennifer was kidnapped. This information was turned over to the state attorney, and the facts and circumstances were turned over to a grand jury. On July 27, 2023, a month shy of what would have been Jennifer's 43rd birthday, officials announced that they had finally made an arrest in the case and that prosecutors would seek capital punishment against the accused. State Attorney Bill Glass made the announcement during a press conference. This was just after the Hernando County Sheriff's Office announced that it has charged the 61-year-old Jeffrey Norman Crumb with the kidnapping, assault, and slaying of Jennifer 30 years before. Glass also said, "I have confidence that we have the right person, and we have the right aggravators in this particular case to treat it as a capital punishment case. This is every parent's nightmare. This is the thing that keeps parents up at night worried about their children." Detective George Loigren, who had spent years investigating Jennifer's case, said shock is probably the best word to describe the reaction of Jennifer's family when he told them about the arrest. He said he did it quickly because I did not want to get emotional. It is a lot for them to take in and absorb, and I can imagine it is going to take some time before it really sinks in. According to Sheriff Neen, who is every viable lead for the past 30 years, including those that came from the Pasco County Sheriff's Office or the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, or private citizens were investigated thoroughly. He added the investigation never stopped. Hundreds of items were tested and retested every time new technology came out in the hope of finding a smoking gun to solve this case. The sheriff added literally countless detectives and sworn law enforcement personnel and civilian and tipsters have had a hand in this investigation. The minute Crumb was identified as a suspect in the case, Detective Lundgren went to work putting a mosaic together or a puzzle. And I can tell you, other than a conviction in a previous case, there was no other piece of the puzzle. That was a big piece of the puzzle. Every other piece of the puzzle that got us to this point were tiny little fragments that gave the state attorney and the grand jury enough confidence to indict Crumb. Sheriff Mianuis also said that they are searching for additional victims. Authorities fear Crumb may be responsible for other crimes. A picture of him from 1993 was released, asking that anyone who recognized him from the 1980s-1990s to contact Sheriff Neenhuis. We urge anyone who had interactions with this individual, has information on other crimes he may have committed, and or may have themselves been a victim of Jeffrey Crumb to reach out to the Hernando County Sheriff's Office and speak to our cold case unit. Despite keeping a lot of information close to the vest, authorities did say that in 1992, Crumb worked in construction as a drywall installer and lived on Somerset Lane in Spring Hill, the Pasco County area where Jennifer was abducted from. His residence was about 21 miles from the place where Jennifer was last seen and 12 miles from where her body was found. Officials also say at that time he drove a blue truck. During Thursday, July press conference, Sheriff Min Weiss kept reiterating Crumb was not on the investigators' radar until the past few years. Records showed Crumb has a significant history of convictions for violent crime. The sheriff said Crumb had been arrested in the early 1980s for armed robbery in Hillsborough County. In 1985, he was charged with kidnapping, assault, and false imprisonment in Hillsborough County. He was arrested by Tampa police in 1987 for carrying a concealed weapon. In 1988, he was caught again carrying a concealed weapon and was charged with aggravated assault. In 1998, He was arrested for domestic violence in Hernando County 3 times. In February 2001, he was arrested for violation of probation in Hillsborough County. He was arrested a few years later for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon in Hernando County. In 2015, he was arrested in Pasco County for aggravated assault on a child under the age of 12. Sheriff Ninhu has stated, "He is a bad individual who enjoyed violence." Crumb is already serving 2 life sentences for the assault and kidnapping case out of Pasco County that was prosecuted around February 2015. He is currently in the Hernando County Jail. Judge Kurt E. Hitzman ordered him to be held without bond and appointed a public defender to represent him. Communities in Pasco and Hernando counties were left shaken after Jennifer Odom's abduction and slaying. When news of the arrest was announced, many residents shared their thoughts and feelings. Gene Cameron, the general manager at Papa Joe's Italian restaurant in Brooksville, recalled how the community was deeply affected by Jennifer's disappearance. "We all remember hearing about her disappearance, Jennifer's, and about the blue truck. Everyone was on alert, looking for answers. I think the bottom line was finding out who did it and getting him off the streets so that another family doesn't have to suffer." She said, "I really feel like the whole community was tormented until they found out the answer." Joseph Gyraton, the owner of Papa Joe's, expressed his anger as a parent, recalling how furious he was when he learned someone could do such a thing to a child and leave her abandoned. "Back then, 30 years ago, as a parent, I was very angry that someone could do something like that to a child and then leave her there in the middle of nowhere," he said. Jessica Ellis, who went to Whiteman Middle School with Jennifer and played in the same clarinet section, remembered Jennifer as always being kind. "We saw each other a lot. We weren't really close friends, but we knew a lot of the same people. We rode the school bus every day, and I just remember her always being nice to me and everyone else who knew her on the bus." She added, "Now, a lot of us are parents ourselves, and the fact that anyone could do something like this to a child makes me hold my 5-year-old a lot tighter now." Grief and fear lingered in the community in the years following Jennifer's tragic death, but the arrest of Crumb provided a sense of closure for many of them. Luckily, these images became solid evidence against Cynthia and Denny. Also saw what appeared to be this deputy who was ejaculating on sweets that were then being served to his wife's class. My God. So do we know if any of the children were actual students or relatives? Or were these just videos that they collected off of the internet? So according to the court documents that we have, the kids that were served the sweets were definitely students in her class. They photoshopped, apparently, the kids' photos, and then they had pictures of the children eating the sweets, the cupcakes that he had ejaculated on. In terms of the actual victims that were raped by these individuals, we're told that they possibly were some of their close associates or people that they knew. There were some other media files discovered on the couple's electronic devices, which didn't include any victims, but showed only Cynthia and Denny indulging in erotic acts. And although Cynthia and Denny were not being charged for these photos and videos, they clearly showed their wicked intentions. The first file was titled, Role Play. Sometime on April 19, 2019, Denny had recorded a video of him and Cynthia having intercourse. In the video, Cynthia could be seen wearing a schoolgirl skirt which the agents believed belonged to child victim number 1, the 12-year-old girl. On top of that, Denny kept calling Cynthia by the child victim number 1's name in the video, while Cynthia kept calling herself a dirty little schoolgirl. And if that wasn't enough, the video also showed Cynthia talking in a creepy manner and mimicking a young girl's voice while saying some disturbing things to Denny. Additionally, the agents found some notes that Cynthia had created on her phone. These notes mostly described Cynthia and Denny's dirty fantasies about child victim number 1. The things which were described in these notes highlighted the ruthless and merciless nature of Cynthia and Denny's rotten minds. During a forensic interview which was conducted with child victim number 1 in early September 2019, she detailed certain actions Cynthia had taken against her before the more explicit incidents occurred. She talked about an incident from 2016 when Cynthia forcibly pulled her by the hair and dragged her into the bathroom, slammed her face against the wall, threw her to the ground and proceeded to slap and hit her continuously. Additionally, she described another incident where she woke up to find Cynthia sitting on her bed with a hostile expression on her face. The victim also mentioned that Cynthia would unfairly blame her for issues in Cynthia's past failed relationships. Denny's devices also contained some images he had photoshopped to aid his pleasures and to satisfy his disgusting obsession with young children. All of these photos had been taken by Cynthia, which she had forwarded to Denny. Another video titled "The Banana Video" showed Denny giving orders and forcing child victim number 1 to perform inappropriate acts on a banana. The agents also found 17 photos of child victim number 2, all of which were taken during March 2019 in their driveway. In these photos, Denny had zoomed in on her private areas. Cynthia and Denny had some seriously messed up tendencies. Not only did the couple engage in disturbing acts, but they also documented them for their own sick pleasures. Their use of cameras to capture these acts on film thus created a twisted collection of footage to revisit and derive pleasure later on was absolutely horrifying. Denny's obsession, as he first took photos or videos and thereafter edited himself into them to satisfy sick desires, defined a whole new level of depravity. As disgusting as these acts were, they seemed to have become a habitual part of Dennis' twisted world. However, his obsession went even further than this. As per Denny's former partner, he had acquired a watch with a hidden camera, also known as a spy watch. Denny had designated a specific bathroom in his home for women to use. This partner noticed a disturbing pattern. Whenever a young girl went into the bathroom to take a shower, Denny would conveniently leave the watch on the counter, secretly recording their actions. It was evident that he was collecting footage through deceitful means. When confronted by his ex-partner about this, Dennis completely lost control. According to the ex-partner, in order to get rid of the incriminating evidence, Dennis destroyed the watch by smashing it into pieces, which only made him appear more guilty. Denny didn't limit his sick agenda to his personal devices alone. He also used the devices provided by the Livingston Sheriff's Office where he was employed. During an extraction from an external hard drive discovered at Denny's home, one of the deputies uncovered a DVD containing explicit footage of a young girl getting undressed in a bathroom. Denny's misconduct during his work shifts in 2012 included a disturbing incident where he pulled over a woman while on duty. While she was searching for her license, Denny used a camera to improperly record her, focusing on her body by pointing the camera down her shirt. When the woman leaned over to search the passenger side, Denny swiftly moved the camera down and aimed it up her jean shorts, attempting to capture footage of her intimate area, as she wasn't wearing any underwear at the time. He repeated this inappropriate behavior 3 times as he continuously encouraged her to bend over and search, all while she remained unaware of being recorded. Additionally, videos were discovered showing Denny engaged in inappropriate activity with female suspects he had just arrested right by the roadside. Denny would stop these women and blackmail them into doing unspeakable things. Denny also derived sick pleasure from engaging in inappropriate acts near sleeping girls. In 2013, he filmed a video of a young girl sleeping with the camera positioned to capture an invasive view of her shorts. Throughout the video, Denny was engaged in self-pleasure. Approximately 2 weeks later, Denny recorded 2 more videos, this time involving 2 girls. Once again, he angled the camera up their shorts and proceeded to engage in self-pleasure. At the end of the video, Denny's bodily fluids were visible on the bed near the girl's feet, which he then covered with a comforter. By then, the agents were convinced that Denny and Cynthia derived pleasure from indulging in their twisted fantasies, even at the risk of getting caught. In another video that was obtained, Cynthia and Denny were seen engaging in explicit behavior on a plane while recording themselves. These individuals shamelessly engaged in inappropriate acts in a way that others could witness. Even when a flight attendant passed them by, they didn't stop and continued to indulge in their heinous acts. Denny and Cynthia's reprehensible actions extended beyond children, as they also victimized a few adults who were only identified as adult victim number 1 and adult victim number 2. According to the LBI agents, adult victim number 1 had visited Denny and Cynthia's house along with a friend. During the visit, Denny started inquiring about everyone's unique talents in bed. The friend of adult victim number 1 began to feel highly uncomfortable and decided to leave. However, adult victim number 2 chose to stay. Unaware of Denny's true nature and thinking of it as a highly naughty conversation, adult victim number 1 told Denny about her special talents. In an interview with the LBI, Adult victim number 1 revealed another disturbing incident that took place in late 2018. She explained that she had visited Denny and Cynthia's home with her young daughter. After having a drink, she started to feel lightheaded and fell asleep. When she woke up the next morning, she found herself in Cynthia's daughter's room with no recollection of what had happened the previous night. When she asked Cynthia about it, Cynthia simply stated that she took care of it. Unfortunately, this woman was taken advantage of and the incident was captured on video. It was likely that some form of drugging was involved in the incident. And not so surprisingly, when the LBI agents were conducting their search of the Perkins home, they found many drugs such as muscle reluctance, multiple insomnia medications, Percocet antihistamines, and flu medication. All these drugs had the common side effect of causing drowsiness. Lastly, there was also a video acquired in which Denny and another woman who was unnamed and unknown at the time of his arrest were taking advantage of adult victim number 2, who was unconscious the whole time in the video. This video was filmed on November 8, 2014. The detectives had no idea who this other woman taking advantage of the victim in the video was, but it was certain that it wasn't Cynthia. As part of the investigation, Denny's career history was examined as well. In July 1998, at the age of 22, Denny applied for a position with the Baton Rouge Police Department. As part of the hiring process, he was required to undergo a polygraph test. During the test, Denny was asked specific questions to which he responded affirmatively. Shockingly, his written explanations for these affirmative answers were truly disturbing. Denny admitted that when he was 18, he engaged in inappropriate behavior with a girl only to discover later that she was just 13 years old. He also confessed that in 1995, he exposed himself in exchange for beads during Mardi Gras, and this indicated a pattern of exposing himself in various situations and sexualizing everything he came into contact with. Additionally, Denny also wrote that he had recently engaged in credit card fraud by attempting to enter a random card number online. However, his fraudulent attempts were unsuccessful. He openly admitted that he'd previously peeked through his sister-in-law's window multiple times while she was undressing solely to satisfy his erotic desires. Furthermore, he acknowledged sending photos of a girl to a website, fortunately without them being posted. During his interview with the police department, board members took note of each of Denny's responses. Their notes highlighted Denny's poor attitude, immaturity, difficulty in answering law enforcement questions, and a lack of consideration for the feelings of his victims. But they noticed that, as per Denny's twisted perspective, engaging in illegal activities was acceptable as long as he could evade detection and punishment. Despite his admissions of criminal activity and poor judgment, one board member simply wrote, "Needs to grow up," in the summary section of Denny's interview document. However, in unanimous agreement, the entire board recommended against hiring Denny, with one member explicitly stating, "Definitely do not hire." And yet, he not only managed to get hired, but also managed to ascend the ranks within the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office to become the head commander of SWAT. People don't change their ways much. And in Denny's case, this was quite evident from his years-long obsession over women and young girls. It became a baffling mystery for the LBI agents working on Denny's case to figure out how he was hired in the first place. Also, what he could have possibly done to reach his then-attained career position without ever getting caught for his earlier crimes puzzled them. In February 2002, during Denny's polygraph test for the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office interview process, he was classified as a high-risk hire. However, Deputy Jason Ard endorsed him and even asserted that Denny would be an excellent employee with good character. Another incident occurred in 2013, when Lieutenant Todd Webb of Baton Rouge PD expressed concerns to Sheriff Ard about Denny. Todd reported that his stepdaughter had a recent sleepover at Denny's house, as she was friends with a girl her age who was staying at Denny's place at the time. Denny's then-wife, who wasn't Cynthia, found Denny lying in bed with the two girls while watching a movie. She called the girl's mother, Todd's wife, and explained the situation. And although she didn't specify why she called the girl's mother, she just had a gut feeling about Denny's ill intentions. Todd's wife didn't think much into the whole situation and let it slide off. The girl didn't return home that night and instead stayed over at Denny's house. Following this, Todd and his wife promptly took the girl to a counselor where she disclosed that during the time she spent at Denny's house, Denny would chase her into a room, restrain her, and engage in inappropriate behavior under the guise of playing tickle monster. Todd subsequently arranged a meeting with Sheriff Ard expressing his concerns and stated his desire to keep Denny away from him and his family. A few days later, while Todd was at a gas station with his family, he observed Denny slowly circling around them in what he perceived as an intimidation tactic. To address this unsettling behavior, Todd had to escalate the matter through the chain of command. Unfortunately, because Denny's actions with the little girl were not technically illegal, no disciplinary actions were taken. While not necessarily illegal, the conduct exhibited by Denny was certainly inappropriate and suggestive of grooming behavior. In 2014, another complaint emerged seemingly from a fellow law enforcement officer at the Baton Rouge Police Department. This officer asserted that his wife had recently had an affair with Denny, and that Denny had also engaged in inappropriate behavior, including tickling with his daughter. Coming back to Denny and Cynthia's arrest on October 22, 2019, as the LBI agents presented all the evidence found against the couple, Denny was immediately fired while Cynthia handed in her resignation just a day after her arrest. Nevertheless, Cynthia and Denny's arrest didn't stop their present workplaces from facing huge repercussions. As the investigation unfolded, the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office drew considerable criticism as it became apparent that Denny's questionable past and seemingly sick behavior had been overlooked. In particular, it raised questions about whether Sheriff Jason Ard had neglected significant red flags such as the 1998 polygraph test, while clearing him to be hired in the department. Additionally, a total of 4 lawsuits were filed in connection with Denny, Cynthia, and her school board. The mother of one victim filed a lawsuit because her daughter had consumed the tainted cupcakes that Cynthia had brought and distributed at the school. In her legal action, she asserted that the school board breached policies concerning teachers providing homemade edible items to students. She also claimed that the school board neglected to hire a secure and competent teacher, failed to conduct a background check on Cynthia before her employment, and didn't follow proper procedures to ensure student safety. The mother also alleged damage to the quality of life, expressing concern about her daughter that she was at a high risk of contracting serious diseases. An additional filed lawsuit detailed how a father of another victim, upon discovering his child had consumed the spiked cupcakes, descended into profound depression and struggled to find employment. A different mother filed a suit asserting that her family had been grappling with behavioral, mental health, and sleep issues since the disgusting incident took place. Yet another lawsuit claimed that Cynthia showed inappropriate photos to students and even took photos and videos of them. All these lawsuits were against the school board and alleged negligence on their part. On December 1939, Cynthia initiated divorce proceedings against Denny. In her divorce petition, she accused Denny of making credible threats against her life, causing her significant fear. She also sought a temporary restraining order as part of the filing. Both Cynthia and Denny were incarcerated without bond, facing charges related to these crimes. Just when the LBI agents thought that since both Cynthia and Denny were in custody, the situation was in their control and couldn't get any worse, it did. In February 2020, a third individual was apprehended in connection to the overall scheme. Melanie Curtin, also a resident of Denham Springs, was identified as the previously unknown woman involved with Denny and adult victim number 2 back in November 2014. Following her arrest, as she disembarked from a cruise ship, Melanie was transported to the Livingston Parish Jail, where her bond was set at $350,000, although she managed to acquire the funds and get released a few days later. She was mandated to wear a GPS monitor as part of her bond conditions. Melanie had previously been employed by the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office, working in the tax department for approximately 18 months between February 2011 and February 2012. At the time of her arrest, she was married to Jason, a former deputy with the Livingston Sheriff's Office. Livingston Parish teacher Cynthia Perkins accepting a plea deal today from prosecutors in exchange for testifying against her estranged husband, Dennis Perkins. And our Ariel Salk was at the courthouse when Cynthia pleaded guilty to multiple sex crimes. Ariel, it sounds like this plea deal caught everyone off by surprise. That's absolutely correct. We were really prepared for at least a 2-week trial. But at the last minute, there was a plea deal that spared the victims the trauma of going into court. While Perkins accepts guilt, she will spend the next 4 decades behind bars. On February 14, 2022, Cynthia opted to accept a plea deal. According to the plea deal, Cynthia would be charged with 3 counts of second-degree assault in an explicit manner, mingling of harmful substances, and a count of production of inappropriate child images. As part of the plea agreement, Cynthia committed to testifying against her ex-husband, Denny. And in return, she was given a 41-year sentence. So she divorced him and, if it gives you any indication of what their plan of attack is, they immediately filed for divorce. She actually just struck a plea deal with some of the prosecutors here. So she now has to testify against him at trial, and she has agreed to do that in exchange for what some people in this area are calling a light sentence. She'll probably do about 40 years and will probably be eligible for good times, so maybe 20 years. So we'll see what happens. What's really interesting about this case is these are the people that you teach your children to trust. You teach your children to trust law enforcement. You teach them to trust you're their teacher and to think that they could do something as sick and twisted as this. It really just has this whole community in utter shock. During her sentencing, Cynthia had already accepted her fate and realized that she deserved it. She even decided to address everyone in the court to make an apology. She started by apologizing to the entire Livingston parish. She told her friends, her co-workers, her family, and her students that she deeply regretted her actions, and Anne was extremely sorry for what she had done. And lastly, she apologized to her victims, telling them that they didn't deserve anything she did to them. Cynthia's father, Greg, also chose to speak on Cynthia's behalf and made an apology to all the victims in the case. As the defendant's father, he didn't condone any of the violent acts against the victims. He made a special apology to the child victims and Cynthia's students at the junior high she was employed at. Greg made a special apology to child victim number 1, saying that he dearly loved her. Since the identities of all the victims were kept a secret, this statement made everyone wonder whether child victim number 1 was related to Cynthia's family in any way. However, right after this apology, he also made an attempt to do some damage control and defend his daughter as much as he could. He said that Cynthia's kids were her life, and being a mother, she would do anything for them. And to come to terms with what Cynthia had done to her victims was hard for them. Greg added that Cynthia's behavior started to change as soon as she met Denny. According to Greg, Denny forced Cynthia into indulging in those heinous acts. He also shared that before anything else, Cynthia was a victim of Denny too. Greg partly took the blame for not looking into Denny's past before giving him the blessing to marry his daughter. Before returning to his seat, Greg prayed for the victim's healing and once again apologized for everything that had happened because of his daughter. In an attempt to defend her daughter, Cynthia's mother also made a statement which was full of excuses. She described Cynthia as a caring and loving person who was adored by all. She almost refused to believe that Cynthia had been a part of those heinous acts against the 2 child victims. And as her husband did, she too blamed it on Denny. Even by the end of her statement, Cynthia's mother didn't focus on apologizing to the victims, but instead tried to convince the ones present in the court to see Cynthia from her eyes. The father of one of the child victims shared a letter written to her by Cynthia. The letter stated, "My life is so much better. I remember every time you hurt me and how scared I was to talk to you. I think of what my life would have been like with you still in it. You are a horrible, selfish, and manipulating person. I hope you are ashamed of yourself and you rot in prison. I wrote this so you know you didn't break me down. You don't deserve to be a mom or even be free. You will forever be known as the person who hurt me." Following her sentencing, Cynthia was transferred to the Louisiana Department of Corrections to fulfill her sentence. The district attorney and her attorneys made statements, and overall, everyone appeared satisfied with her verdict. It was emotional inside the courtroom today. The sentencing hearing gave Cynthia Perkins an opportunity to not only apologize to her victims, but to her family. And those who were impacted by Perkins the most were able to share their piece. I think what you heard today was a lot of pain in there from a lot of people. Cynthia Perkins showed little emotion as she apologized to the victims, her family, and her former students and co-workers before she was sentenced to 41 years in prison. Perkins pled guilty to multiple sex crimes, including "It really goes to show you the damage that people can do with these evil acts." Perkins' family spoke. Her father and mother told the judge their daughter was a victim of abuse by her husband Dennis Perkins. This started when she met Denny Perkins, and he corrupted her and enforced her and coerced her into doing some terrible things that she has a lot of guilt over and she has a lot of remorse for. Melanie's trial, which took place in March 2022, spanned approximately 2 days and was conducted in a camera-free zone. A victim who spoke during the trial revealed that she remained unaware of what had happened to her until the discovery of the video during the investigation. Melanie's defense attempted to argue that she was drugged and had no recollection of the incident. Melanie claimed to have visited the hospital that night, believing it to be an allergic reaction, attempting to leverage this in her favor. However, the prosecution presented a nearly 20-minute video depicting Melanie willingly participating in the disgusting crime. In the video, a blanket had been placed over the victim's head. She was lying there completely unconscious as Melanie and Denny performed explicit acts on her. It was understandable why she had no recollection of what had happened to her that night. She mentioned that Denny had proposed the idea of having a threesome before, which made her really uncomfortable. She was absolutely unaware of the recorded incident and expressed a desire to literally die when she was shown some of the footage. The video strongly suggested that she might have been drugged. After deliberating for almost 8 hours, the jury presented Melanie with a guilty verdict for aggravated assault in an explicit manner and video voyeurism. Melanie erupted in loud screams upon hearing the verdict and caused a disturbance in the courtroom. Although her attorneys sought to keep her out on bond so she could look after her children, the judge denied the request. She was promptly taken into custody to await sentencing and was escorted out of the courtroom. Later, on March 21, 2022, the day of her sentencing, Melanie decided to give an impact statement in which she denied having an affair with Denny but admitted that there had been a few isolated incidents 6 months to a year before the incident of November 2014 when she and Denny had spent some time together. She expressed remorse, stating that when she learned that Denny was married, she ended her relationship with him and completely cut him off. She said that befriending Denny and trusting him was the biggest mistake of her life, and she deeply regretted the decision of going over to Denny's house that November night. Expressing more regret for not testifying earlier, she appealed to the judge for mercy and emphasized her desire to be an actively involved mother in her children's lives since they'd already lost their father. She prayed for a fresh new start. Melanie never offered an apology to her victim. This lack of remorse on Melanie's part only showed how Melanie was more concerned with preserving her own life than acknowledging the traumatizing impact that she'd made on the victim's life. Melanie kept on pleading with the judge for leniency. Melanie's sisters portrayed her previous husband as an immensely abusive man, emphasizing Melanie's entrusting nature towards Denny. Despite the serious nature of the charges, the discussion seemed to center around portraying Melanie positively with little regard for the well-being of the victim. Melanie's boyfriend addressed the court and drew comparisons to other people who had committed more severe offenses, but were given comparatively lighter sentences. He specifically mentioned Cynthia and said that Cynthia's crimes involved children. He emphasized on the fact that while Cynthia's actions were voluntary and took place with her full awareness and cooperation, Melanie's did not. In the end, Melanie was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The sentence was mandated by the aggravated charge. The public was surprised by the fact that Melanie received a more strict sentence compared to Cynthia's 41-year term. But Cynthia's lighter sentence was probably influenced by her acceptance of a plea deal and her decision to not take the case to trial. This action by Cynthia spared the victims from being subjected to further distress. The legal options chosen by Cynthia were not adopted by Melanie. Hence, by the end, Melanie was given a stricter punishment. Even after the scrutiny from Melanie's family, the judge maintained the original sentence. The victim, through a statement read in court, expressed the profound impact on her life, detailing emotional struggles, anxiety, and panic attacks. She emphasized the incomprehensible betrayal and the lasting trauma by stating that it was now extremely hard for her to look at her body in the mirror and what Melanie did to her was not okay. She added that she might not be able to indulge in any romantic activities with anyone ever again. In an unexpected turn of events, Denny chose to not go to trial and instead entered a guilty plea in January 2023 as part of his plea deal. Livingston Parish Deputy Dennis Perkins pleads guilty today and sentenced to 100 years behind bars. Fox 44's investigative reporter Ariel Salk joins us in the studio. Ariel, this plea came somewhat out of nowhere from my understanding. Is that correct? That's right. For months, both sides told us that they were not going to take a plea. But in a surprising twist, 1 week before the trial is scheduled to start, Dennis Perkins admitted his guilt. Denny admitted guilt to several charges and received a 100-year prison sentence ensuring permanent incarceration. According to police stipulations, he would also be ineligible for parole or an appeal. During Denny's sentencing, the mother of one of the victims also gave an impact statement which said, "As parents and caregivers, it's our job to protect our kids from evil. I'm not sure if there's anyone you care about besides yourself, but I hope you spend every day worrying about your own safety and the devastating effects of the deplorable actions. You will no longer have control over your victims anymore. And in the end, you're getting what you deserve." A victim impact statement means we're victims. You see, we are survivors. 3+ years later, I'm raising survivors, not victims. So here's my statement. I am so thankful to not have to sit in this courtroom with you or your attorney ever again. Have a nice life in prison. Dennis himself addressed the court and gave a statement saying, "I'd like to say I am sorry. I spent more than 3 years living in a box and it's not about me. I just want to make the statement, Jesus Christ has forgiven me. I'm grateful for that. I hope and pray that anybody that this is affected finds hope and healing." The public found satisfaction in achieving justice without subjecting the victims and the entire community to the trauma of the trial that was scheduled for January 2023. Attorneys took the time to meet individually with each victim, ensuring their full understanding of the plea terms, and secured their approval before proceeding further. We felt satisfied that this accomplished justice, and we were able to get a win without putting the victims of this entire community, through the rigors of that trial that was going to happen next week. And were the victims of the family members satisfied with this plea deal? Absolutely. We took time to meet with each of them individually and make sure they fully understood all the terms of the plea and that we had their blessing before going forward. I think you guys said a few months ago that you guys were not going to give Dennis Perkins a plea deal. What changed to that? Well, we didn't really offer him a plea deal. What happened was we were contacted by the defense. They made an offer, and at that point we considered it. And after some tinkering, we were able to come to an agreement that was accepted. You talked about the victims too. How disturbing would this evidence be to come into a courtroom? I mean, not just for the victims, but for the jurors who would have had to watch it. It would have been very disturbing. And that's why we're so happy that we were able to achieve what we did today without going through that. Primarily protecting the public safety. No one has to worry about Dennis Perkins hurting anyone ever again. And the victims were consulted and were all okay with this, and we were okay with it. So yes, justice was served. What Cynthia, Denny, and Melanie did was undoubtedly horrifying. And while they all received a just sentence, the journey ahead for their victims was still going to be a tough one. The trauma and abuse they had faced at the hands of the perpetrators might even have left them scarred for life. For them, the road to recovery would not be an easy one, but knowing that their abusers were now locked up behind bars gave them a sense of relief. While Cynthia serves her 41 years in the Louisiana Department of Corrections prison, her ex-husband, who is remarried, is raising the 3 children with his current wife in a happy blended family in what seems to be a normal home. Melanie is currently serving her life sentence in Concordia Parish Correctional Facility. And Denny at the moment is carrying out his 100-year sentence in the David Wade Correctional Facility, which is a medium to high-risk security prison. Going through each and every aspect of this case, do you think there are more victims who just haven't been found or haven't come forward? Do you think any of the child victims were related to Cynthia and Denny? Even after knowing Denny's full background and the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office Board unanimously deciding to not hire Denny, why do you think Deputy Jason Ard hire? This is Louise Porton, a 22-year-old single mother entering her apartment along with her 2 lovely daughters only to have something horrifying happen mere hours later. When help arrived, her elder daughter was already dead. But this was just the beginning of one heart-wrenching tale. This young mother was soon hit by another heartbreak when her youngest daughter also died under unexplainable circumstances. However, when the investigation unfolded the mystery of the case, many dark secrets became unraveled. Even when the mystery was finally solved, everyone had a tough time wrapping their heads around the chilling truth. On February 1, 2018, around 10:30 p.m., UK's alternative medical line for non-life-threatening emergencies, 111, received a call from a worried mother, Louise Porton. She claimed that her 17-year-old daughter, Scarlet Vaughn, was unwell and was having trouble breathing. When the respondent asked her whether she could wake her daughter up, Louise said she couldn't, and as soon as paramedics reached Elliott's retail park in Rugby, they found little Scarlet unconscious and immediately rushed her to the hospital. However, baby Scarlet was declared dead upon their arrival. Scarlet's cause of death was unexplainable at the moment, and when her mother was questioned, Louise claimed that her daughter had been diagnosed with the flu. All of this information didn't seem to add up for the respondents, and as they tried to unfold the mystery behind her death, they couldn't believe what they'd found. As the detectives investigated baby Scarlet's death, they discovered another shocking piece of information. Scarlet's elder sister Lexi Draper had also been found dead 2 weeks ago under similar circumstances, and the cause of her death was not determined until now. At the same time, the mother of both girls reflected some unrealistic behavior. She showed no signs of grief or distress for a mother who just lost her 2 daughters within the time span of 2 weeks. As the death of both the girls seemed strange, the police launched an investigation to find what had exactly happened to these innocent souls. But little did they know that they were soon going to find something that would shock their inner souls to the core. Both girls had been with their mother in their last moments, so the investigators had the possible suspect. However, it was important to look into her past to know who she actually was, and if she had any possible connection with her daughter's deaths. What they uncovered was nothing short of disturbing. Louise Porton was born into a British family in 1996 and lived with them until her teenage years. From her childhood, she was a very isolated child and wouldn't talk to other people. By the time she turned 11, her parents got separated as her mother went to live with another man. Louise cut all her ties with her mother, and this separation left a huge impact on Louise's mind. She was raised by her father along with her sister Karen and one other sibling. Her family described her as a problematic child who would like to create trouble for others. Louise, as a kid, would dig her nails into her cousin's skin just to get revenge on them. She wouldn't interact much with her family and sat in a corner during family gatherings. As Louise grew older, she also developed a fondness for money and started to steal from her grandmother, Joy. She'd often visit Joy to steal things, and when confronted, she emotionally blackmailed her grandmother. Louise told her grandmother that she wouldn't come to visit her if she were blamed for the stealing. As Louise grew into a teenager, she started sleeping with whomever gave her attention. Other than that, she also grew materialistic and started to demand money in exchange for physical relationships with men. This behavior of Louise worried her family, and they told her to stop, but instead, she left her family and moved out. After moving out, Louise was often seen bragging about the money and her branded clothes that she was getting, and even claimed that her family was jealous of her. Later in her life, Louise met a man named Chris Draper and had 2 daughters with him. She became pregnant at the age of 18 with her first daughter, Lexi Draper. It seemed that Louise was finally trying to lead a normal and happy life, but it was just a deception. In April 2016, her grandmother Joy had fallen sick and wished to see her for the last time. Her family tried to call her, but she didn't visit her grandmother, who was on her deathbed. Even during her grandmother's funeral, her family called Louise, even threatening her that if she didn't attend the funeral, they would sever all ties with her. Still, true to form, Louise skipped her grandmother's funeral, leading to most of her family to cut off their ties with her. Louise and Chris' relationship seemed to be growing from outside, but in reality it was falling apart. Louise soon became pregnant with their second child, but she decided to leave Chris and flew back to her hometown, Rugby, in August 2016. After coming back to Rugby, she set her sights on the father of her children, Chris. To torture her mentally, she even went to an extent of claiming that her second-born daughter, Scarlet, was not his. Louise gave Scarlet a different surname, Vaughn, instead of Draper, to prove that she was not Chris's daughter. While she was doing all of this, Chris was not even allowed to meet his daughters. This left him traumatized, and Louise continued to live her lavish life in Rugby. On one hand, she tried to torture her ex-boyfriend emotionally and get him banned from seeing his own children. And on the other hand, she didn't seem to be taking proper care of her daughters at all. Louise described herself as a model to her male suitors, and wrote in her bio of Badoo app's profile how she was open for any type of photo shoots or trade. After moving out from Chris's place in August 2016, Louise had started to live in a rented property in Willen Hall near Walsall. She rented it from Leanne Bradley, an old-time friend of her mother. Leanne claimed that Louise would often leave her daughters with her while she went out. Sometimes this would occur 4 times a week, and each instance would generally be for the entire day. She stated that Louise would do anything to avoid taking care of both girls, and someone else was always looking after her daughters instead of Louise herself. While she continued to go out with men and live her life on her own terms, she would sometimes lose her temper on her daughters. Whenever her children would cry, Louise would tell them to just shut the up, or else she would give them a good reason to cry for. Once, Lexi was having a temper tantrum on the floor, and Leanne saw Louise pick her up by the wrist and yell at her to get off the floor. In another instant, Scarlet was crawling, and Louise grabbed her by the ankle and forcefully dragged her back to some distance from the door. Despite all these things, Leanne claimed that the children looked healthy, and she never had any concerns as she never saw any bruises or marks on them. In early November 2017, Louise and Leanne had an argument that led to Louise leaving Leanne's property. After this, Louise was provided with temporary housing at Beechwood in Rugby, Warwickshire, which was close to her sister Karen's home. As they both started living nearby, Louise and Karen became closer, and Karen started to see the family almost every day. By this time, Louise had started to go out with different men and would receive luxurious gifts from them. She'd often exchange her explicit pictures in return for money. Knowing this, Karen grew concerned about Louise's children and would often remind her to look after them. Chats between Louise and Karen revealed an incident where Louise had once gone into a van to sleep with a man while her daughters were asleep. After knowing this, Karen brought the matter up with Louise, who acknowledged her mistake and promised her that it was the first and last time she'd done this. Louise's messages and chats also revealed that she'd brought a man to her bedroom and engaged in physical relationship with them whilst her children were in the same room. Louise told them that they could do their deed as long as they were quiet. On another night, a different man had asked her about her children while she was coming to meet him, to which Louise replied that she could just lock the front door and her daughters would be asleep until 7 a.m. anyways. When Karen confronted her about all of this, Louise shrugged off everything and jokingly said that she could start giving her children sleeping tablets. On the day of baby Scarlet's death, Louise visited her sister's place, and Karen noticed some unusual things in Scarlet's behavior. Her sister revealed that Scarlet was not a child who would sleep during the day, but that day she had fallen asleep twice, which seemed quite odd to her. On that very night, Louise checked into a hotel at Rugby with Scarlet, as she claimed that she was being haunted by Lexi's memories at her home. This is the last footage of Scarlet from February 1, 2018, where she could be seen in her mother's arms. By 10 p.m., Louise had carried Lexi out of the hotel and put her into a car and drove to a gas station. Louise drove around and filled in the gas, all while baby Scarlet laid motionless in the car. It's speculated that while she was driving around and refueling her car, little Scarlet was lying lifeless or in the final moments of her life. While Louise was driving around to take Scarlet to the hospital, Louise's phone record of around the same time revealed that during this time she was asking for money from a man named Patrick. She then parked her car in a retail park's parking lot and waited for some time before calling 111. Which is meant for non-life-threatening emergencies. She told the respondent that she was headed to the hospital as her daughter wasn't conscious and was not breathing. A mother calling non-emergency and claiming that her daughter was not conscious and breathing raised flags for the paramedics. Acting upon the urgency of the situation, paramedics reached Louise's location within 9 minutes, only to face their worst nightmare. Little Scarlet was not breathing and her body was stiff and cold. They immediately rushed her to the hospital, where she was declared dead. It was also determined that she'd been dead for some time. Upon analyzing Louise's movements in the CCTV, it was later discovered that she'd deliberately taken a longer route to the hospital. And then instead of going there, She stopped in a parking lot and called the non-emergency number. As baby Scarlet's post-mortem was done and her elder sister Lexi's autopsy report came, it was revealed that both of them did not have a natural death. These little souls died because someone had intentionally blocked their airway, and they also had internal injuries. Lexi had thumbprints on her nose, while Scarlet had evidence of recent internal bleeding in her neck tissues. All of these things seemed fishy to the authorities following the phone call made by Louise for Scarlet to the non-emergency number. She stated that her daughter was not breathing and unconscious. This seemed doubtful to the investigators as to why anyone would call the non-emergency number for a baby who wasn't breathing, especially the mother. This prompted the officers to launch an official investigation immediately after baby Scarlet was found dead on February 2, 2018. However, her sister had also met the same fate 2 weeks earlier on January 15, 2018. And on both occasions, their mother had made calls to emergency or non-emergency numbers. It was revealed that when Louise made the emergency call on January 15, 2018 and paramedics declared Lexi dead, it was not the very first time she'd called the emergency numbers for her elder daughter. It was already chilling, but the revelations that followed were even more disturbing. Prior to this, she had called the non-emergency number 111 on January 2, 2018 and claimed that Lexi was having breathing difficulties because of seizures. However, as soon as the ambulances left for her apartment, she canceled the ambulance and took her daughter to the hospital by herself. While Louise was taking her daughter to the hospital, it was revealed by her phone's history that she was communicating with multiple men at that moment. She was arranging a meeting with them and was willing to get intimate in exchange for the money. Fortunately, Lexi had survived, but the doctors couldn't find the actual cause of her condition. They kept Lexi under observation in the hospital overnight and discharged her the next day on January 3, 2018. However, on the very next day on January 4, 2018, Louise called 999 during early hours of the day claiming that Lexi was having difficulty breathing. Paramedics rushed to her apartment and were able to resuscitate her. Lexi was again admitted to the hospital for a thorough examination, but doctors couldn't determine the actual cause of her breathing issues again. They'd given her some antibiotics thinking she just had a chest infection and discharged her on January 2018. During this time, Louise seemed too calm to the hospital staff for a mother whose daughter was this critical and had been to the hospital twice in the span of a week. While Lexi was being treated, Louise was still texting men she'd met through a website and was offering to perform some intimate acts in exchange for $300. She even took some topless pictures in the hospital's washroom to send to a man. On the afternoon of February 14, 2018, Louise had gone out with her sister and 2 daughters to the Brewers Fair in Rugby and returned to their apartment around 6 p.m. Just hours before her murder, Lexi was seen cheerfully trying to enter the apartment with her mother and sister. In this CCTV, Louise looks like a caring mother who carefully opens the door for her daughters and even holds the door until her younger one enters. Lexi entered the apartment as soon as her mother opened the door for her. But little did that baby know that the person she was trusting had planned something sinister against her. Lexi's mother was not only leading her to the apartment by opening the door, but also leading that baby towards her own death. After being revived twice, emergency respondents again received a call from Louise Porton on January 15, 2018, around 1 a.m. regarding her daughter's health. Unfortunately, this time, paramedics could not revive baby Lexi, and she was declared dead. The medics, however, stated that baby Lexi's skin was pale, her lips blue when rigor mortis had set in. The respondent described the girl as freezing and completely lifeless upon his arrival. Louise's mobile phone search history also stood out to the detectives as Louise had made some chilling searches on her phone around the time of her daughter's death. When Lexi was admitted to the hospital for the very first time, Louise had searched for something odd. On January 2nd, Louise had searched why did a toddler having a fit stop them breathing? Then on January 4th, she again made some weird searches like why did my 3-year-old stop breathing? On January 5th, she searched for can you actually die if you have a blocked nose and cover your mouth with tape? And man commits suicide by super gluing mouth shut. Then on January, the day of Lexi's discharge, Louise looked at an article entitled, Toddler Brought Back to Life After Nearly Drowning and For How Long After Drowning Can Someone Be Resuscitated? Investigators also discovered that on January 14th around 11 p.m., just hours before little Lexi's death, Louise has searched for how long it took a dead body to go cold up to the shoulder. Is it true you shit yourself when you die? And then she even went on to read an article titled, 5 Weird Things That Happen After You Die. About an hour and a half later, she called the emergency number. It was speculated that she deliberately delayed calling the emergency number. Her cell phone records also revealed that she texted one of her friends, one down, another one to go on her way to the hospital with Lexi. The horror didn't end there. On the very next day of Lexi's death, Louise arranged a date for herself with a man and accepted 41 requests on the dating website. She was even seen laughing and yawning at the funeral parlor, and the manager also reported that she was on FaceTime the whole time. After all the evidence indicating that it was Louise who had tried to kill Lexi and Scarlet, she was arrested on March 18, 2018. It was determined that she didn't have any criminal history other than being charged with wasting police time when she was a teenager. However, due to insufficient evidence, she was released later on in March 2018. In a strange post in June 2018, Louise posted both girls' clothes out for sale, which clearly showed how Louise had no remorse for both her daughters' deaths. In November 2018, she posted an RIP post on Facebook for her daughters, for which she faced severe backlash. In January 2019, 1 year after the departure of those precious souls, Louise was arrested again. This time, the investigators had all the evidence against her, and she was charged with 2 counts of murder for the deaths of her daughters. Louise's trial started in July 2019 at Birmingham Crown Court, and she pleaded not guilty. She claimed that she does not remember anything about how her daughters died and that she loved them. She even claimed that her daughters never hindered her lifestyle, but her actions stated otherwise. Throughout the whole investigation, Louise never showed any real signs of emotion. To protect Louise, the defense argued by giving the reason for her mental state, but she was concluded to be mentally fit by the experts. A jury of 10 men and 2 women found her guilty for the murders of her daughters. Finally, on August 2, 2019, Judge Justice Amanda Yip sentenced Louise Porton to life imprisonment with a minimum of 32 years in prison. She would remain at H.M. Prison, Foulston Hall, Derbyshire until the age of 50. On September 3, 2019, after more than a year and a half after their murder, Lexi Draper and Scarlet Vaughn finally went on their last ride arranged by their father Chris Draper. Both girls were laid to rest in the West Midlands in the UK. He arranged a horse-drawn carriage for ferrying the girls' tiny coffins to the cemetery and bid his lovely daughters goodbye. The horses were draped in purple while their tiny white coffins were covered in wreaths. He even took it to his social media and posted that he would always miss his daughters and that he has got their backs. Chris stated that his only comfort was that his daughters were now together. To date, he regrets that only if he had been allowed to live with them, both of his daughters would have been alive today. While Louise snatched his beloved daughters from him, one more life was taken away because of her. It was the life of her own mother. Louise's mother, Sharon Porton, who tried to support her daughter throughout, committed suicide in September 2020. She was found dead at her home in Willenhall, Walsall, and everyone believed that she took her life after being tormented by her daughter and the murders of her grandchildren. In her Facebook post, Sharon expressed how hurt she was because of her daughter. She addressed Louise as Lou and stated that she'd always supported Louise, but in return, her daughter had hit her and abused her. Sharon expressed how she was more hurt emotionally than physically. After that, she cut all ties with her daughter and grieved for her grandchildren. As Louise remained behind bars for taking 2 precious little souls from this world, others also had to suffer because of her actions. A father forever lost the chance to see his daughters grow and smile again, and a mother had to bear consequences for supporting her daughter. Louise's mother, Sharon Porton, who went to every extent to support her daughter, tragically took her own life after being accused of supporting and raising a monster. Her death showed how deeply hurt she was by her daughter's actions and both her granddaughters' deaths. This case also sparked debate about child welfare and the responsibilities of parenthood, shedding light on how tragedies such as this case could be prevented if the right decision and action are taken on time. Meanwhile, Lexi and Scarlet's story continues to resonate as a symbol of innocence lost, And those two little babies would always be remembered as cheerful and happy souls. May they forever rest in peace. Brienne Pennington was born on October 27, 1992 in Montgomery, Texas to Robert and Elizabeth Hull. Her world included her brother Brandon Hull and 4 half-siblings, Bryce, Brooke, Pete and Julian Robinson. Nieces, nephews and cousins added layers of love to her expansive circle. She was talented and passionate about many things in life. She loved horse riding, adventures, science, and even raising exotic chickens. Knowing her was like knowing what it would be like to know warmth and light in the form of a person. Brienne and Aaron met in Arizona. Their first public appearance as a couple was seen on Facebook. Pennington often posted about his wife on Facebook, starting with the first public picture of her on April 16, 2013. He captioned the photo, "The hottest girlfriend," and it showed a smiling young Brienne Pennington in a red hoodie by a lake. Pennington and Brienne got married in July 2013, according to wedding photos he posted on Facebook. They had their first child in spring 2014, and Pennington posted photos and videos of his wife's pregnancy and birth on Facebook. In 2015, Pennington joined the Air Force as a senior airman. He worked as an airlift, special mission, and aircraft maintenance journeyman, according to spokesperson Laurel Falls. His Facebook post showed that he was stationed in Japan for some time in the late 2010s, and he even posted a video taken from a military aircraft in 2017. One of the family's recent documented outings occurred on October 11th at a pumpkin patch. As per Pennington's post, where he mentioned being with his wife and shared pictures of their kids. Brienne Pennington's most recent post featuring her husband dates back to 2022. Pennington was last stationed in Arizona and transferred to the Air Force Reserves in mid-2022. He officially left the military altogether on February 17, 2023, according to spokesperson Laurel Falls. In 2022, Brienne and Aaron planted roots in Gardner, turning their house into a home. Always radiating cheerfulness and friendliness, Brienne, now 30, touched the lives of those around her, weaving a web of friendships while cherishing her family. They had 4 children, Avi, Levi, Charles, and Heidi, aged 2, 5, 7, and 9. The family of 6 lived in a house with 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms located about an hour outside of Worcester. Public records showed that they bought the house in June 2022. But little did Brienne know that the worst was just around the corner, and she could never have expected what would happen next. On October 22, 2023, at around 9:14 a.m., a neighbor of the Penningtons, Carrie McDermott, called 911 to report that the Penningtons' 4 children had come to her house. They were scared because they couldn't find their father, and their mother was in her bedroom crying. The children also told the neighbor that their father's car wasn't in the driveway. Police arrived within 5 minutes and found Brienne in bed in an upstairs bedroom with a gunshot wound to the face. Officers didn't find anyone else in the house. Brienne was pronounced dead at 9:30 a.m., and the chief medical examiner's office was notified. The kids probably overheard their mom's last moments on the other side of the door. They might have heard her cries for help, but being kids, they thought it was their mom crying. So they went to the neighbor's place saying their mom was on the floor crying. Their dad, Aaron Pennington, was nowhere to be found. This makes one wonder, where was Aaron during all of this? Could he be the one responsible? And if he was, then what could be the reason behind such a heartbreaking decision? The search for Aaron Pennington unfolded on multiple fronts. The investigation also revealed that he planned his actions before shooting her. Upon a partial review of his cell phone's contents, investigators stumbled upon a note time-stamped at 7:04 p.m. on Saturday, October 21st. This note added a creepy twist to the case. The unsettling instructions read, "Don't say anything. Be quiet. If she wakes up, just say you're getting nasal spray." The note takes an even more disturbing turn with the following directives. Get on the side of the bed, very close proximity to the head. Put a hole in her head. This plan, so to speak, was probably a couple of months in process. And along with the fact that he had significant mental health issues, tragic situation. I have 4 kids myself. I just can't imagine what those children are going through right now. Also, the last time he was seen in security footage. This captured Aaron Pennington leaving the residence in a white 2013 BMW sedan around 8:50 a.m. on October 22nd. It's very heavily wooded. Sparse. You can go a long ways without seeing anything. So the grid search is large at this point in time. The vehicle was discovered about 5 miles from the couple's home by a bow hunter navigating Camp Collier near the Ashburnham line on Monday, October 23, 2023. Law enforcement's collaborative efforts continue to unravel the details surrounding this heartbreaking incident. Local police, troopers, K-9 units and the State Police Air Wing combed the forest on both Tuesday and Wednesday, while a state police dive team investigated Lake Wampanoag on October 27. A significant effort on October 31, 2023 expanded the search area to around 200 acres. He's got some training from the Air Force, which includes probably search and rescue training. And being that he's from that area, he's probably very familiar with the woods from the area, and as well as most likely, he had planned this out for a very long period of time based upon what it would appear to be in his phone. So it seems like something happened in the house that was a catalyst for him to go ahead and go through with his plan. And with that plan, he went ahead and went to the woods or went to whatever, but I'm very confident that the Mass State Police are going to find this guy. When police looked into Aaron's military past, they learned that he'd worked with ration missiles in defense and reportedly holds an active security clearance. He also possesses an illegally owned firearm, specifically a shotgun, as indicated by the discovery of 3 spent cartridges at the scene of his wife's tragic death. As of November 2, 2023, detectives in the state police's fugitive unit were still thoroughly examining leads, delving into Pennington's life, past behaviors, and trying to find potential connections to other parts of the country. The decision to continue large-scale search efforts is evaluated case by case, factoring in various considerations. Subsequent investigations revealed 3 spent casings in the bedroom, and an autopsy confirmed Brienne's tragic death as a homicide due to a gunshot wound. When looking into a possible motive for the murder, police found some interesting evidence. According to documents, Brienne Pennington expressed her intention to leave her husband, taking their children with her. Investigative interviews and neighborhood surveillance revealed that the couple had been grappling with marital problems over an extended period. Pennington had been dealing with ongoing mental health challenges and had even expressed thoughts of taking his own life. In response to these issues, his wife planned to relocate to Texas with the children. This phase when a victim tries to leave is often identified as the most dangerous. The research underscores the heightened risk, particularly when threats to hurt oneself are involved, ranking among the top 20 indicators for domestic violence homicide. Moreover, the court documents noted that Brienne was known to possess a firearm at the residence for her protection. However, neither of them had the required license to carry firearms in Massachusetts. 2 key questions arise. Did Aaron Pennington do this alone, or did someone else help in this sinister plan? Also, was this murder carefully planned, or are these notes just the thoughts of someone thinking about doing something really dark? The mysterious note makes the investigation even more complicated. As authorities persist in their pursuit of the suspect, Brienne's devastated family expressed their disbelief at losing the loving, caring, compassionate mother of 4. We're all in shock about this. We're all in shock. We had no idea something like this would ever happen, conveyed Brooke Pertile, Brienne's sister. He better turn himself in. He needs to stand up for what he did and turn himself in and not be a coward. He needs to turn himself in. He needs to do it for the kids. After the tragedy, one of Brienne's friends took to Facebook expressing concerns about Aaron Pennington's potential self-harm. Knowing her, it was like knowing what it would be like to know warmth and light in the form of a person. Aaron is still on the run, although it's thought that he'll probably die by, posted Brienne's friend, Aaron Mackey, on Facebook. If any of you reading this struggle with mental health, I urge you to seek help. As we come to the end of this strange story, officials shared that they think Aaron Pennington with his military skills might be surviving in the woods close to the Camp Collier area in Ashburnham. But here's the latest twist. As of November 1st, police believe he could still be out there armed and trying not to get caught. Another theory they have is that he might have taken his own life in the woods. It's important to mention that special canine units trained for tracking decomposing bodies haven't picked up any signs of a body in the Camp Collier area as of November 1st. So here's where we are. Brienne's children are now in state custody. Erin Pennington is still on the run and the case is still open. As we navigate through the chilling details of this unfolding mystery, the search for Erin Pennington intensifies. Standing at 6 feet 2 inches tall and around 175 pounds, he remains at large. Now here's where we need your help. Brienne Pennington owned a firearm for protection, yet neither she nor Erin had a license to carry. If you spot Erin, don't hesitate. Call 911 Gardner Police at 978-632-5600 or Massachusetts State Police at 508-829-8236. But be advised not to approach him as he's considered armed and dangerous. Your vigilance could be crucial in this ongoing investigation.